What's one piece of advice you would give to skeptics about studying UFOs? And what's one piece of advice you would give to ufologists about studying UFOs?
I think I would say to the skeptics that I absolutely understand their mindset, and I try to approach things from a skeptical point of view as well. I mean, particularly given my government background in this at the UK Ministry of Defence, that was our default position. So my message would be, I get it. I've been there. I think skeptics probably are better. I don't want to take sides, but I think at this they are better at identifying and using good sources of information and being able to use critical thinking to say this is a good source and this isn't. I think sometimes the believers are a little bit too quick to say, hey, look at this, look at that, whereas the skeptics are much more narrowly focused in on, well, what can we say is legitimate? And so, for example, start with trying to back everything up with, well, here is a video, not just on YouTube, but on the DoD website. So I would say carry on with that, but don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, because even though there are obviously some things in the believer camp which are just totally crazy.
They raped me. They gave me an erection.
That doesn't mean that they don't have some good stuff too. So I would say, even though, you have to wade through a lot of stuff and there's a signal to noise ratio, do look at what the believer community is presenting, because there are some nuggets in there.
What about the women who lost fetuses and eggs, and the other men who had semen taken from them?
So that's my advice to the skeptics. My advice to the believers is I get it, but the skeptics are genuinely interested in this too. I mean, there are one or two who are probably just contrarians, who are like, there'll be the guy in the bar who doesn't really have a view on something, but just deliberately takes the opposite view just to be difficult. There are one or two of those, but for the most part, I would say, no, the skeptics are very well-intentioned and genuinely interested in this too. So they're not, being a skeptic does not make one a debunker. It just means that their critical filters are different, and that they have set what I call the evidence bar a little bit higher. So I would say to the believers, understand that mindset and respect it. But then I would say to both sides, find your common ground.
Yes. Yeah.
And if you can't agree at the edges, which you almost certainly won't, maybe you can, like a Venn diagram, maybe you can meet in the middle and agree on that common ground.
Following is an example of a story that skeptics may find hard to believe.
It's been 36 years since the book Communion exploded into the public consciousness. It spent 6 months atop the bestseller lists. It sold millions of copies. It's inspired so many other similar books by other artists. It became a hit movie, and the guy who wrote it is our guest today, Whitley Strieber. Whitley, great to see you.
It's a pleasure to be here, George. They raped me. They gave me an erection.
Well, why do you think, okay, so let's just...
What about the women who lost fetuses and eggs, and the other men who had semen taken from them?
Why do you think that's being done?
You have to let people go where they want to go.
But why would these beings be doing this to human beings if it's true?
Let me give you some possibilities. One, they are making a sort of seed bank of mankind. The second possibility is that they're breeding human beings.
Hybrid.
Hybrid is another story, because I'm talking about just breeding human beings.
All right.
I've heard there's contactees, abductees, and experiencers.
Experiencer is someone who has ongoing experiences with the visitors. An abductee is someone who basically started out generally with being abducted. A contactee is not necessarily someone who has had a physical encounter. They have a much more positive attitude toward the whole thing than those of us who've been dragged out into the night and raped.
On a scale of 1 to 10, Nick, how much do you believe we've been visited by extraterrestrials?
I really don't know. So, I mean, I suppose I would say it's a 5. It could be, well, if I'm saying that no is definitely not, and 0 is definitely not, and 10 is, yeah, I would say it's a 5. I just don't know. And I don't think there's anything wrong with saying I don't know. And it's interesting, going back to what we were just talking about the skeptics and the believers. What I find is at the extreme ends of the belief spectrum, so to speak, you have dogma at both ends. I mean, I said not all skeptics are debunkers. Some are. And with the believers, some of the true believers are just so crazy that they'll believe absolutely anything and everything when it's just clearly nonsense. So what you find is there's a sort of what I call a sort of finger pointing, finger wagging certainty at the extreme ends of the belief spectrum. It's a sort of no, absolutely this is true, or absolutely no, it isn't. Whereas I think the more nuanced commentators, and I like to think I'm in that category, we're not afraid to say, I don't know. And that's where I am on the visitation issue. I would like us to have been visited because I think the world would be more interesting and fun with aliens in it than not. But I'm not going to say that something I would like to be true is true, because I simply don't know.
Yeah, great answer. We're actually I'm speaking to Mick West next week. That's why I asked that.
Fellow Brit, and Mick's interviewed me as well, actually. So he and I, like two Brits getting together, had a very civilized conversation.
I'm curious, do you have any fears about alien visitation or anything like that?
I think that the big issue with alien visitation is that it would be very disruptive. Now, if the aliens wanted to attack us and destroy us, that they could easily do that, because if they had the technology to get here, then destroying the planet is just a trivial thing. They could just steer an asteroid into the planet and boom, everyone's dead.
My interview with Michael Shermer, and that is a hugely, it's one of his most popular interviews, I believe. And I mean, he's a real polymath, and he's got a lot of very well thought out opinions on a huge range of issues. And of course, he and I, there are things that we don't agree on, but again, there is that middle ground. And I think you've watched it, but for those that haven't, I think they would maybe be surprised by how much he and I actually agreed on a lot of this. And he's in the Galileo project too, by the way.
Yes, and that's where I learned about all that, to be honest with you. I completely agree. I found it fascinating. That was what's so great about it, because when you do let all that go, that's when you can really have the great conversations.
Well, that's a perfect place to end. Nick Pope, thanks for coming on. You're one of the more interesting people working in this space. I love talking to you, and I love watching you. We'll look forward to seeing your shows, and thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed. Please subscribe if you want to support us. Follow us on Twitter at Vetted Podcast. This is Vetted.